Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov chaired a meeting of the United Nations Security Council on Monday, which meant the representative of a country accused of violating the UN Charter and brutally invading its neighbor was given a platform to warn that the values of the world body were under threat.
As during the Cold War, we have reached the dangerous, possibly even more dangerous threshold.
Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council, which has a rotating monthly presidency. Before Lavrov's remarks, Secretary General Antonio Gueterres stated plainly that Moscow's invasion ran contrary to the United Nations mission.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in violation of the United Nations Charter and international law, is causing massive suffering and devastation to the country and its people, and adding to the global economic dislocation triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic.
And the U.S. envoy, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, went further.
Our hypocritical convener today, Russia, invaded its neighbor, Ukraine, and struck at the heart of the UN Charter.
Thomas-Greenfield also accused Russia of violating international law by wrongfully detaining Americans, calling for the release of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and ex-Marine Paul Whelan. Whelan's sister Elizabeth was in the chamber on Monday.
And I want Minister Lavrov to look into her eyes and see her suffering. I want you to see what it's like to miss your brother for 4 years. I'm calling on you right now to release Paul Whelan, Evan Gershkovich immediately, to let Paul and Evan come home, and to cease this barbaric practice once and for all.
Before the meeting, Elizabeth Whelan accused Russia of arbitrarily detaining Americans as bargaining chips with the U.S.
This is not the work of a mature and responsible nation. It is the action of a terrorist state.
In addition to the U.S., a string of Security Council members, including France and Britain, condemned Russia for its war on Ukraine. But Moscow was not without allies in the room. China, which has a no-limits partnership with Russia, welcomed Lavrov as chair of the meeting and sided with Russia in condemning Western sanctions.
Unilateral sanctions that violate international law must be resisted.
The United Nations is working to save an agreement that allows the safe export of Ukraine's grain from Black Sea ports that could expire on May 18th.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony. The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.